Hello, and welcome to Difference Machines, Technology and Identity in Contemporary Art at the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo, New York. My name is Tina Rivers-Ryan, and I am one of the co-curators of the show, along with Paul Vanuz, an artist and professor at the University at Buffalo. Difference Machines presents the work of 17 contemporary artists who address the complex relationship between the technologies we use and the identities we inhabit. Collectively, they ask some of the most urgent questions we face today. How is technology changing the way we see ourselves and each other? In what ways does it contribute to, or allow us to resist, prejudice and systemic forms of oppression? What role should it have in our lives and in our communities? When the web first emerged in the 1990s, many people imagined that it would allow us to escape our bodies. Some celebrated the idea that attributes like our race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and disability would become irrelevant. But instead, the opposite became true. Our offline and online selves have fused. While the internet allows us to express ourselves and connect with each other, there is also a darker side to digital technologies. Some governments and corporations are creating databases that surveil and monetize our identities, as well as biased algorithms that perpetuate discrimination in everything from education and healthcare to employment and the justice system. The forerunner of the computer was called a difference engine, as it was used to calculate the differences between numbers. Today, we are surrounded by difference machines, or computers that are used to encode the differences between us. The artists in this exhibition explore our newly digitized identities by creatively adapting both familiar and emerging technologies. Their projects span the last 3 decades and range from software-based and internet art to animated videos, bioart experiments, online games, and 3D printed sculptures. Many examine how digital systems contribute to the exclusion, erasure, and exploitation of marginalized people. Others emphasize how digital tools can be repurposed to tell more inclusive stories or imagine new ways of being. The exhibition opens with a video screen showing interviews with the artists, in which they each discuss their own thoughts about technology and how they use art to explore what technology means to them. All of these videos are available to watch online via the artist pages on our website, which you can find linked to from the exhibition page at albrightknox.org/differencemachines. We'll begin our tour of the show with the artist Hassan Elahi, whose giant banner, 1,000 Little Brothers, hangs on the north wall by the entrance. Although this work was made in 2014, it draws upon a project Elahi started back in 2002. In the wake of 9/11, he was wrongly identified as a potential terrorist, leading to a 6-month investigation by the FBI. When the FBI asked Elahi to keep them informed of his whereabouts, he began photographing all of the mundane details of his travels as a professional artist and art professor, from his airplane boarding passes to the meals he ate and the toilets he used. He emailed every single photo to the FBI, flooding their inboxes with useless information in an act he called, quote, aggressive compliance. He also posted his photos to a website for all the world to see. While satirical, the website was also practical, as it ensured that his friends and family would always have information about his last known whereabouts in case he ever suddenly disappeared. Elahi declared the website a kind of ongoing, internet-based performance artwork called Tracking Transients. He continues the project to this day on his Instagram account, where he posts photos from his travels with captions indicating the photo's location and exact date and time. The work you see here includes almost 32,000 of the photos from the Tracking Transients website, printed on 7 canvas banners that together measure almost 28 feet tall and 15 feet wide. The enormous size makes us viscerally feel the overwhelming scale of the invisible databases that now track everything about us, including the photos many of us constantly and willingly share through our social media accounts. Elahi's actually mentioned that when he first started the project 20 years ago, nobody could understand why he would post a photo of his lunch to the internet. He also noted that the work has changed over time because paradoxically, the best way to stay private now is to post more, as not posting has become a kind of red flag. The photographs here are overlaid with the pattern of colored bars that US television stations use to test the emergency broadcast system. This suggests that the expansion of digital surveillance constitutes a kind of nationwide emergency. According to Elahi, who lives near Washington, D.C., the stripes also refer to the abstract paintings of the Washington Color School of the 1960s, and particularly the striped canvases of Gene Davis, which are included in the Albright Knox's collection, who, despite living in DC, avoided representing his politics in his art. Although Davis's work is abstract, the comparison points out the question of who gets to remain private and whether that privacy is just an illusion. Elahi called this work Thousand Little Brothers, suggesting that the big brother from George Orwell's book 1984 is now many little brothers. Instead of one government or agency watching over us, there are now thousands of government and corporate databases tracking everything we do online and offline. But Elahi's own story reminds us that this surveillance doesn't impact everyone equally. In America, the civil rights of the most marginalized groups, including immigrants, people of color, and Muslims, for example, are the ones most at risk. Next to Elahi's banner hangs Joydy Minaya's 2016 installation, #Dominican Women Google Search. As indicated by its title, Minaya made this work by using Google to search for images of Dominican women on the internet. The top results were of young, attractive women, many with dark skin, scantily clad, and posing suggestively for the camera. These results reflect stereotypes about quote-unquote exotic women from this Caribbean island, and also the sexualization of Black and Latino women more broadly. Minaya compiled these images, some of which bear watermarks from the websites that posted them, and digitally cut them into pieces, isolating their body parts in a way that recalls the act of fetishization. She printed these parts on PVC boards at human scale, cutting them out along the edges of their enlarged pixels. These are backed with quote-unquote tropical print fabrics, like the kinds that are used in Hawaiian shirts. The pairing makes us think about how the identity of Dominican women today remains tied to the legacies of colonization and tourism. As they hang from the ceiling like a children's mobile, the cutouts slowly shift their position, creating a disorienting maze in which the body parts keep coming together and falling apart. How we see these women literally depends on our own bodies and our own positions. We also only ever see fragments of a woman, not her whole body or her whole story. The work is therefore a kind of metaphor for the problem with our digital tools, which treat our individual identities as things that are stable and easily identifiable and labeled and tracked, when in fact, how we present ourselves can change from context to context or over time. It also points to the problem of search algorithms in particular, which are reinforcing stereotypes by elevating certain search results over others, and not capturing the fuller picture of what it means to be, for example, a Dominican woman. If both Hassan Elahi and Joydy Minaya help us better understand the problems with contemporary digital technologies, other artists in this exhibition, like Daniel Brathwaite's Shirley, demonstrate how they can also be really empowering for communities that normally have not been given access to the resources to tell their own stories. In 2020, Brathwaite Shirley released her digital game, We Are Here Because of Those Who Are Not, which you can play at blacktransarchive.com. The installation of this game here begins with a powerful kind of manifesto on the wall, which asks you to acknowledge that you are entering a pro-Black, pro-trans space. It's a way of ensuring that this space is centered on the needs of the artist and her communities. When you enter the space, you see a game room that might look like someone's basement where people might spend hours playing games. But the game immediately rejects the idea of a kind of imagined universal player by asking you to acknowledge your own identity. The first prompt asks you to identify whether you are Black and trans, or cis, meaning you are cisgendered, or identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. Depending on your answer, your path through the game forks. Black trans people are invited to join a community of lost ancestors. Non-Black trans people are encouraged to use their relative privilege to learn to support Black trans people. And cisgendered people are confronted with a quote-unquote security feature that blocks quote-unquote trans tourism, followed by opportunities to learn about being a better ally. With its non-graphical interface, We Are Here Because of Those That Are Not recalls the text-based games that emerged in the 1970s, which invited players to enter virtual worlds through their imagination instead of their eyes. Although this game also includes imagery, it is highly stylized. All of the figures are semi-abstract digital avatars who speak and sing with auto-tuned voices as they float in liquid landscapes. This resists the transformation of Black trans lives into spectacle and avoids the stereotypical reduction of Black trans people to either fetishes or victims of trauma. Made in collaboration with other Black trans women, The game demonstrates how a community can create its own digital tools to imagine new bodies, create new spaces, forge connections, and archive histories on their own terms. We end our tour with a new work by Saya Wolff. For decades, she has been combining live footage and digital effects to imagine a fictional world of people that she calls the empathics. In some of her work, we learn the backstory. The empathics are chimerical creatures created in a lab by fusing the DNA of women, animals, and plants. These humanoids appear to defy categorization and embrace the idea of hybridity. One might say that they, quote unquote, empathize so much with other organisms that they start to become them. Wolff herself is Japanese African American, and her work is often discussed as belonging to the tradition of Afrofuturism, which combines Black culture with the tropes of science fiction. A huge problem with a lot of classic science fiction is that the bodies it imagines are exclusively or predominantly white, which implies that other races don't exist in the future, as if they've been eradicated. Instead, Afrofuturism and related movements, like Indigenous futurism, insist on seeing marginalized racial and ethnic groups as not just quote-unquote primitive cultures belonging to the past, but as cultures who have always pioneered their own technologies and belong in the future. In this large installation of videos shown on 9 55-inch monitors, Wolff shows the empathics in a kind of utopian paradise. We see bright colors, we hear soothing ambient sounds, and when we watch the empathics, we can see that all of their movements are smooth and fluid, as if the space is literally frictionless. We also can see that each of them has different facial features, although those features are partially obscured by makeup and costuming. In other words, in this utopia, differences between bodies continue to exist, but are not so easily articulated into rigid, easily identifiable categories. Wolff's work therefore uses digital tools and science fiction to ask us to imagine a world that doesn't exist yet, one that has difference, but without oppression. Art always has helped us imagine possible futures. Wolff calls this work Landscape of Anticipation 2.0. What landscape could we anticipate more eagerly than this?
Greg Millum? Is Greg here? Okay. Chris Alberti? And Michiel Bachiani?
Teaches us also about the power of refusal. These Yamanae are tied up in some strange entanglement. Their molecular game.
Well, I think everybody's brain does is that it runs a continuous simulation routine of the entire world and everybody around it. And then ultimately there's the
As we have seen on our tour today, artists are using a variety of digital tools to explore how technology is changing how we see ourselves and each other, for worse and for better. We hope that Difference Machines encourages communities here in Western New York and beyond to appreciate the creative possibilities of digital art. At the same time, as our society starts to pay more attention to problems like digital surveillance and algorithmic bias, we hope this exhibition also demonstrates the unique role that art can play in giving concrete form to these critical debates and imagining alternate futures.